now. So as a bit of an introduction to the Transforming the Trent Valley scheme then, so we are a landscape partnership scheme funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund for 5 years. So we run up until 2024. And we cover the area which is seen in purple on this map here. So I appreciate if you're not from the Midlands, that might not mean a lot to you. So we're basically slap bang in the middle of the country, about as far away from the sea as you can get. And as you might have guessed by the name, we are focused on the River Trent, and particularly the middle reaches of the Trent here. So if you have a look at the map here, then the Trent runs kind of in this S shape in the middle here. So from Rugeley, it runs east along to Orawas, and then north through Burton-on-Trent, and then into Derbyshire, and it just skirts south of Derby there as well. We also take into account a couple of the tributaries as well. So we have the River Tame down here that runs north, and it meets at the National Memorial Arboretum, it meets the Trent there, and then the River Dove comes down past Uttoxeter, and it meets just near Willington here as well. So you can see from the scheme area that it's a very long, thin area, because we are focused on the river, on the floodplains, and on the wetland habitat surrounding that as well. So we cover both Staffordshire and Derbyshire and East and West Midlands, so we cross those boundaries. Around 60% of our area is Staffordshire, and around 40% is South Derbyshire. There we go. My screen didn't want to work. So the partnership is led by Staffordshire Wildlife Trust. They are the lead partner. They hold the grant. They're responsible for a lot of the reporting to the lottery. But there are 16 different delivery partners and supporting partners involved in the partnership as well. So the people you see on the screen here are responsible for delivering a proportion of that scheme. So we have lots of different projects running under the scheme umbrella. So 16 different projects make up the Transforming the Trent Valley scheme. And these organisations have responsibility for delivering one or more of those separate projects. So the staff team for the Transforming the Trent Valley is made up of 6 staff members from Staffordshire Wildlife Trust. I'm employed by Support Staffordshire, which is an organisation which helps voluntary and community groups, and we have a staff member from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust as well. So it really is a partnership team, it's a partnership scheme, lots of people coming together to work together there. So our supporting partners don't have responsibility for delivery of a project, but they sit on the board, they support us, they steer us, they help with resources and facilities. And that includes people like the Environment Agency, South Derbyshire District Council, and also a couple of industries, so tarmac industry and aggregate industries. So we have a lot of quarrying in the area. That's a real key part of the landscape actually. It's shaped a lot of the landscape in the area. So very briefly, just to talk about what we're doing as part of Triple TV. The separate projects are broadly grouped under 3 different themes. So we have Connecting Communities Through Action, which is where I sit. And that is all about the projects which are getting people involved in the landscape, getting people connected to nature, learning about the wildlife that's part of the scheme, practical conservation volunteering, school engagement training courses, children and family activities, youth engagement. So it's all those bits of the projects which are connecting the people to the landscape and to the project as well. Then the River Valley Connections theme is all about the access to the countryside and access to the landscape. So that's things like the circular walks, cycle paths, improving portage points so people can access the river on canoes and kayaks, but it's also the intellectual access, as it were. So information on the website, interpretation boards, and some projects such as virtual tours of some of our nature reserves and some augmented reality, which I don't quite understand but sounds very interesting. And then our final theme is the Transforming the Landscape theme. So that's the larger scale projects. They include things like where we reprofile some of the river to put in some of the meanders or reinstate some of the paleo channels, improving some of the area for wildlife, improving the wetland habitat, reinstating some of the floodplains and working with natural flood management to hold the water on the floodplains where it belongs. And then finally, the cultural heritage projects, so looking at some of the built heritage and the history of the area. So for example, we have 70 World War II pillboxes along the River Trent and the River Dove, with obviously the link to World War II. They were the final defence, really. So if we ever had been invaded, those pillboxes, that stock line, was our final defence, and luckily they never got used. So that is a whistle-stop tour, a very brief introduction of the Transforming the Trent Valley scheme, just to give you a bit of context as to what we're doing, why we're doing it. And I will hand you over to Ben from the West Midlands Marine Group now for the Trent talk. So, yeah, Ben's just sharing his screen here. As we said, if you do have questions throughout his talk, please pop them in the chat, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end as well. So I will be quiet because you don't want to hear me anymore, and I'll hand over to Ben.
Thanks very much, Nicola. Evening, everybody, and just want to say thanks, Nicola, for hosting the Zoom talk. It's not something I've done before, but it's quite interesting, and especially during lockdown, that we can kind of bring things to people's homes that can't necessarily get out to other areas, and hopefully have a bit of an interest in the subject that we are going to talk about today. So just want to start by introducing two our other members on the chat. There's Martin George, who's on there, and he's going to be doing our live Twitter tonight. So as well as this, you'll see Martin's tweet updates, just to give people a taste of what we are talking about this evening. And then also is Paul Hopwood, and he will be trying to answer any questions that you want to put on the chat. But I am mindful at the end that we will try our best to do a Q&A session. I know there's quite a lot of people on here this evening, so we'll try and do both as best we can. Okay, so just a little bit about us, really. There's 10 members in our group, including volunteers, with a wealth of experience. We quite like project-based ringing, so some of those are colouring projects, which are gulls, terns, peregrines, wagtails, lapwing and stonechat, and we'll come on to the lapwing a bit more shortly. And we like to think now we kind of specialised in thermal surveys, really. It's something that we feel we've pioneered for surveying and ringing. We've helped a lot of other groups and ringers and ecologists around the use of thermal, but those people have now got their own units and kind of took it to their own, really, which is what we were keen on happening, where people actually take this technology and use it in their specialist subject area or for their species of interest. So we do have a special interest in farmland species as well. I'm just going to turn my camera off because my there you go. Sorry, my signal's a bit jumpy. So, how did it all begin? There's always got to be a good story, hasn't there, where it all began. And it began with lapwing blindness, we called it. And it was an affliction that one of our trainees suffered with quite badly. We went to a field at Marsh Lane Nature Reserve, which is one of our reserves that we ring at. And they were producing a good number of chicks, and the bird watchers were saying, yeah, there's, a few chicks on there. So myself and Paul Hopwood took the trainee, see how many we could see by eye. And for those of you who've done it before will know how difficult that actually is. So during that morning, I think we did a 30-minute session just to kind of reduce as much disturbance as possible, and found 11 by eye. But what we were finding is that the trainee just couldn't see them. So what me and Paul were doing was saying, well, between us, there's a lapwing chick. Have a walk down the line, see if you can see it. And no matter what we did, the trainee just couldn't see these lapwings. So at the end, myself and Paul were just stood in the field thinking, well, there's got to be a better way to do this. How would we find them? And that's where thermal imaging became an idea. And speaking with Nick Barlow, who's the land manager, we asked if he had a unit, a thermal unit, because he's got gamekeepers on the site. And they did, and they came out with us a week later. We did the same about the same, 30 minutes, and we found 29 chicks with the thermal. But not only did we find the thermal imager, not only did we find the lapwing chicks, we found nests with eggs, nests with freshly hatched chicks. So what that was able to do was give us a more accurate picture of the nests and the records for that area, which we could feed into the BTO nest record scheme or bird track, which is what we try and do with everything we do. So we were able to, these are some of the photos from that morning with the gamekeeper. And as you can see, the different stages that we actually found, as well as wandering chicks as well. So we thought the next year, I think we actually managed to get another thermal imager. And in the second year, during the 3 sessions, we found 96 chicks using it, plus nests with eggs, freshly hatched chicks again. So it showed that it was a real success. And we just thought, well, if we can find lapwings during the day with this, what other species can we find? And one of those was jack snipe. So this is a video that Paul recorded, and it's of a site with a number of jack snipe on, which you could find the jack snipe with the thermal imager and actually give accurate counts of how many jack snipe are within that site, which again is something we haven't been able to do before. So then also something we've never been able to do before is actually get a hand net, walk around the back of the bird and just pop the net over the bird like you've seen there. So this was fantastic, really, step forward in the way of monitoring birds, and we're able to catch them year on year and show good site fidelity for this species. And I'm aware now that other groups have took this idea on and developed it really more than we'd ever imagine, and are catching more jack snipe than they've ever caught before. So it's really good to see others adopting these techniques to further their knowledge around species they're particularly interested in. So a common question we get all the time is, what equipment do you use? Would you recommend this thermal? Would you recommend that thermal? So what we use is a Pulsar Helion XQ38F. Now, for those that are aware of kind of thermal and have looked into it themselves, this model is now discontinued. And the new model to this is the Pulsar Helion 2 XQ38. However, you can't find it in shops at the moment. Thomas Jacks, who's the provider for all the companies in the UK, have said that there will be in stock within the next few weeks, but we've heard that before, so we're just hoping that that is the case for people. However, there are other models, so we paid about £2,500 for ours, which is a lot of money. But when we were looking at them first, we were aware of some funding with the West Midlands Bird Club in our area, and we approached them with the idea of thermal imaging. And actually, they had the forethought of actually seeing the benefit of using thermal, and they agreed to the funding, and we were successful with that. And actually, since then, we've gone from strength to strength, and further funding has allowed us to buy newer models and actually widen our area that we cover with other units for other ringers, really. So it's been positive. There are cheaper models. They've brought out the Pulsar Axion models, which are cheaper. The XM22 is the cheapest model, and we have used it, and we would not recommend that model, if I'm honest, just purely on the fact that it just doesn't do what we need it to do. The XM30, I'm aware that other groups are using them with some success. I think one group use an XM30 that do some of the jack snipe work, and they say it's pretty good. And I know that some people have brought the new Pulsar Helion 2 XPs and are saying they're very good as well. So there are a lot of different ones on the market. We haven't used all of them. We are keeping up to date with a number of kind of reviews and that people are putting on. But if I'm honest, for what we do, we're really happy with what the pulsars do for us, really. So that's where we'd recommend at the moment. And I'm hoping maybe other people, other ringers that do buy other pieces of equipment or other models can actually give us an update on what their thoughts are around theirs. That's a couple of pictures of that. So then we were thinking, well, okay, it's pretty good for what we've used at this moment, but what else can we use it for? And in our area, we're lucky enough to have Nightjars. And as you see by the video, it's actually a bat chase in a Nightjar, but this is some footage Paul took on the chase of a Nightjar that we were trying to catch. So before the days of thermal, I mean, I'm a big guy, I'm 6'1", big built bloke. And before the thermal, I had to find a bush big enough to hide under next to the net so I could see whether a bird had gone in the net so I could get it out as quick as possible and process it and let it go. But now with the thermal, I can set the net, I can go and sit in my car, have a cup of tea whilst watching the net quite easily, and I can see everything that's going on, as you can see with the footage here as it's about to go in the net. We've been able to use this not just for Nightjars, but for owls, waders at night and stuff like that. So it's been just a game changer in terms of this. And we're able to see the bird go straight in the net like that, and we're able to get to that bird quickly and get it out and process it. So it's reducing the disturbance and reducing our time in the field. And I think as we go through the chat, you'll see that's a common theme that we try and look at, really. Reduce time, reduce disturbance, and that's what thermal, I think, brings to the table for us. I think one of the most interesting things about the net monitoring, with the Nightjar especially, is we catch one bird, there's one bird there, but actually with thermal now, you can see, yes, we've caught one bird, but there's 3 others flying around. So it gives you a more accurate picture, especially for forestry or other landowners that want to know their populations. This is actually showing what is there and giving a better account of what's about. So it's kind of pretty good for that. And it's a lot more comfortable sitting in your car drinking tea than freezing to death under a bush. So we've only used this once, thermal drone. I'm aware that lots of other people have used drones successfully to find other species, which is brilliant. And there are a lot of papers on that, the use of that. But we were interested, and me and Paul, both being police officers, we contacted our colleagues to say, well, you know, when you do drone training, do you fancy coming up to Cannock Chase and having a go? Which they were keen to do. So they came along. They calibrate the drone to a certain temperature to look for, and they put the drone up, and within 5 minutes, well, probably less than that, within about 2 or 3 minutes, it indicated there was a hot spot on the field, and they directed us by radio to the spot, and you can see the Nightjar lift off. So it looks good, and it looks like it has potential. I can't say that it works brilliantly because, again, we've only used it once. But it's a really interesting piece of technology to find what I would say quite a difficult species to normally find, because normally you're having to walk up and down the patches trying to find them or flush them. And again, if the drone works as well as this, again, it's reducing disturbance and reducing your time on the field. So it can only be a positive. Right. So another area of business we've looked at is nest boxes. So when I joined as a young trainee bird ringer, one of the tasks every breeding season was to walk around a nature reserve which had 200 tick boxes, and they wanted them monitored. So I was past the heaviest ladders in the world that had been passed generation to generation of ringer down to carry around. Then I'd have to put it up to 200 trees, climb it 200 times and back down, and give the result of that nest box, whether it was occupied, whether it wasn't. And kind of, it was a bit exhausting by the end of the day. So what we were interested in is, what can the thermal do? around this. So we did the same. We went back to, I think we did 100 boxes. And we went up to each one, but we checked it with a thermal first. And what we found is if there's a heat signature in that box, there's a bird in it or an active nest. If there isn't, there's nothing in there. What it doesn't show you is if the nest has failed, which is something that people might want to record for the nest record scheme. So yes, it doesn't show that, but actually, if you are just interested in getting there, ringing the birds or checking active nests, the thermal does show you whether or not these boxes are occupied. And as you see, there's 3 examples on the screen. The right-hand 2 are taken from a very old unit that doesn't actually take photos, so I had to do a mobile phone picture through it. But the one on the left was given to me by Wendy James. And you can see the 2 white, I don't know if you can see my arrow on the screen, but you can see 2 white spots there. And that is at each tawny egg. So the heat of the tawny egg is coming through the box there. So you can see that there is something in that box. So again, when we went to check barn owl boxes and tawny owl boxes, you were able to see a heat source. Now, I couldn't tell you what type of bird is in there, and that's maybe something that people actually do want. But again, if there's no heat source in it, we're really confident there is no bird in it. So if you've got a number of barn owl boxes to check and you're carrying ladders everywhere with you, then you'll know that whether you need to climb up to it or not. So it does reduce time in the field again and actually reduces disturbance. The second picture, there's a tawny owl right at the bottom where it's a really heat spot. But the reason I put this photo on as well is if you leave it too late in the day and it's sunny, on the top of here you can see where the sun's catching the box. So you can get false readings if it's a bit of a sunny day. Oh, okay, we'll move forward. I've clicked that by mistake. But you get the drift. And the second one is the squirrel, a squirrel dray. So it is pretty good. I think there is a number of ringers now that have brought units for that purpose. So it's quite interesting. I'd be interested to get their feedback if they do use it for that as well. So the next slide is breeding bird surveys. This is an area we haven't done a lot of. We've got a really good nest recorder in the group, but it's just having time. And this year we were going to try and do it, but with COVID and everything, it's kind of put a dampener on a lot of stuff. But what I wanted to do is show you a photo we took from an old unit of a sand martin colony. So again, without trying to click forward, you can see here little black holes, and down here some black holes, and then above the ones that are bright. So the black holes are unoccupied. The ones with the light coming out of are occupied nests. So we did that by sitting there and actually watching these just to confirm what we thought. So as you can see, it's not as time consuming as sitting there and kind of trying to watch and count, and you're able just to have a look with the thermal, take an image, and you can go back home and count it if you wanted to, which is the beauty of thermal as well. But as you can see there's a number of unoccupied holes and a number of occupied holes. So it gives you a little bit more accurate data than what you normally may have, or in reduced time anyway. We believe that there is other options of having a look. So during night time, you can see a lot of birds roosting in trees and bushes. So we do believe if someone took it out during breeding season, they may be able to see bird nests, especially song thrush, blackbird, within hedgerows. But it'd be interesting to get any feedback off anyone that actually does do that, because that's something we haven't actively looked at. Next slide. So roosting birds, this is a really interesting one. The little dots on the floor are skylark. As you can see, we've just seen a fox back there. And as we swing around here, you'll just see little white dots. There you go, more white dots. They are all skylark. When you first get the unit, yes, okay, you might not be able to know which species they are, but with behaviour and experience with the thermal, you kind of understand how they are and what patterns they sit in and how they behave while they're roosting. This is, I think, one of the biggest things for us, because you're able to stand on the side of a farmer's field glance across with the thermal. With the skylark, you do have to walk into the field a little bit more, but you're able to see and count these birds and get an accurate figure without actually walking through them. So if we, as we come on later, do some dazzling and we walk through fields to catch birds, if we come across big, large flocks of birds like skylark or fieldfare on the floor, we're able to actually avoid them. Because if we went to try and catch any of those to bird ring, then we probably would catch 1 out of the 80 with a hand net. But there's no point in disturbing these birds to catch 1 out of 80. So what the thermal allows you to do is actually walk around that flock and target individual birds, which I think is a real benefit, to be able to reduce that disturbance for certain species. I think what's really interesting about the thermal looking at roosting birds is actually what does roost in the fields. And I could give you the longest list in the world of what we found, but some of the key species is water rail, fieldfare, redwing, wheatear, yellowhammer, skylark, obviously. Just a wide array of birds, grey partridge. I mean, and what's been brilliant with this is we've been able to go on farmers' fields who didn't realise they had certain species like grey partridge, and just walk on the field and find a plovey of 20 birds. An example of that is Walsall, which isn't far from me. I went on a field you wouldn't even believe, 1 mile away from Walsall town centre. Walk on the field and find a massive covey of 23 grey partridge, which the farmer never even knew they had there. So it's really opening things up for landowners. And actually what he's managed to do, because he's found that out, is being able to we've been able to give him a bit of advice, and he's managed that land for that species now. So he's improved that management of that land, so they're more successful, which is, it's always a bonus. Right, yeah. So that's kind of roosting birds. Again, the key thing for me with that is you can go out and you can count. You don't have to walk up and down fields all night. You get an accurate number of what species. It's reduced disturbance because you can walk around these birds and not actually walk through them. And it gives you an accurate count, so you can feed back into bird track and BTO surveys or RSPB surveys. Okay, this is quite a cool one. This is a starling murmuration, and we're just really interested because we get swallow roost and starling roost within reed beds, and for bird ringers, sometimes you either want to catch starling or you really do not want to catch starling in nets. Probably the latter more than anything. So what's really interesting with this is, by watching with the thermal and recording, we were able to see where they prefer. As you can see, they're dropping in now into the reed bed to roost for the evening. So what this allowed us to do is see which area they were using of the reed bed and how they reacted after. Because although the video stops in a minute, the birds land into the reeds, but then they move through the reed bed. And that's what swallows did as well. So what that enabled us to do was set our nets in key points within the reed bed to be able to pick and catch, maximise our catch really, to ring. And if we wanted to avoid them, we could. So that was always a bonus. I mean, one of my favourite stories, I think, around reed beds and roosts and stuff like this is, I was at Marsh Lane and I walked into a hide, and there was a bird watcher there, and he'd been there for 2.5 hours. And I said, "Oh, what are you here for, mate?" And he says, "Oh, I came to see the bittern, because we had a bittern at Marsh Lane." And he said, "I've been here for 2.5 hours. I think it's gone. It hasn't been seen yesterday, and I haven't seen it today, and I've wasted my time." So I got my thermal out and I looked, and within 10 seconds, I was able to locate it in the reed bed, and I said, "There it is." And he got his binoculars on it, and he could see it, and he sat there for another hour watching it, and he was the happiest bird watcher I've ever seen. So it's a really fantastic tool, which opens up a number of options really, and a number of things. And if we're able to kind of monitor that and see that the bittern was still there, And I know at the time we wanted to do some work in the reed bed. And by monitoring that reed bed and seeing the bittern was still there, we were able to say, well, actually, let's hang off. There's no rush to do it. When it's moved off, then we'll do it. And then we're able to do that. So it gives us other options, really, than just ploughing through a reed bed and disturbing habitat that birds are using that we're not necessarily aware of. So, Dazzling. Now, for us, this has been a major game changer for us, because before thermal, I don't know if we were just really bad at it, or whether we just didn't have any as the birds around that we thought we had. And we'd walk for miles, for hours, up and down fields with a torch, with a net, just looking for anything we could. And we just never saw anything. And I think between us, I think we caught 2 birds in, I don't know, hours and hours of trying. Now, that's a woodcock that was just cut there with a really short-handled hand net. And I think this is the biggest game changer for us, because we were able to go on a field, again, scan the field, see every bird pretty much, or mouse or owl or anything that's on that field, and we're able to be really focused and targeted straight to that bird. And again, avoid large flocks of birds, which is another positive. And the other day, I was able to go out for 35 minutes with my daughter, who's extremely good on the net, and we caught, in 30 minutes, a woodcock, 2 skylark, a field fare, and we just missed a grey partridge. So it allows you to just spend so much less time in the field. So you're able just to get in there, do what you need to do and get home. And really kind of interesting as well what you see out and about. And all we do is we use the thermal imager, a normal torch, well, a lamping torch, and a small handled landing net, just to catch them with. And we've caught numerous species with it. I can't even really remember how many species we've had, but quite surprisingly large number of skylark, a woodcock, and I think skylark is probably one of our main species. And I think we've probably done, Paul will correct me, but I think we've probably done since 2016 about 1,500 skylark between us, which we're kind of getting into and kind of understanding their habitat and their behaviour a lot more by doing that. So for me, Dazzling, it's brilliant. You're able to just get on the field, walk to that bird. If you miss it or catch it, you can turn around and you're on to the next bird. And it's just a lot quicker, a lot less time in the field, and a lot less disturbance, because you're no longer walking up and down fields that you can't see the birds. You are seeing everything that's on them fields. And actually, something interesting that Paul did, he was lamping on a field in Staffordshire and saw what he thought was a mouse. He's gone to look at it with a torch and found it was a harvest mouse. And actually, there was no records of them. I don't know if it was within Staffordshire or within that kind of area. So we were able then to contact our friends who run breeding colonies, and we introduced them into the farm to kind of increase that. We're able to increase that species within that farm because the habitat was good for it. So it just shows kind of what's open to you and what's available. So all positive stuff there. Then this video here is a badger on the left, and they're all golden plover. And this is a badger either trying to play with them or trying to have some dinner. I'd probably go with the latter. But as you can see, again, with the thermal imaging, we would never see this behaviour before without thermal imaging. Not only have we been able to tell farmers and landowners what species they have that they were not aware of that they had, but we'll also be able to see this behaviour, which may or may not have been recorded before. So it's really interesting to see, one, what's about, and two, the behaviour of certain animals, or hunting rabbits or owls hunting and stuff like that. So we're able to really capture new stuff. And I think for us, I think the key themes throughout this has been your data is more accurate. And I know that a lot of people like breeding bird survey data, but I think for us, wintering data is really important too. And that's what the landowners feel as well. So accurate data, reduce disturbance, and reducing time in the field, which has always got to be a bonus, if I'm completely honest. As I'm getting older, it's getting tougher. So the pros and cons. Again, I've gone over these. Reduced disturbance allows you to have a focused approach, whether that's on species or whether that's just on the bird that whatever bird you're targeting at the time. Time saving, nest boxes so you're not climbing up 200 times to ladders. Sorry if you can hear that, it's my dog drinking water. Works day and night. So as we've said, we've caught lapwings and jack snipe in the day, and night it's fantastic. And allows accurate night data, gives you night animal behaviour, and works for a variety of species. Now, there's always cons with things, and I think the biggest one, we put this out in a survey on the Twitter, and it came back as cost, because it is expensive. You know, £2,000 for a unit or more is pricey, but we find that if there's a funding stream or you're able to chip in each to get one, I mean, we had one between quite a number of us, and we just set a calendar up, and we made sure that it was fair out. Everyone was able to use it. Everyone was aware of how to use it, and it kind of was worth it in the end, because the data that it brings back, especially for those that have got specific interest in a certain species, like some with jack snipe or skylark like us, you know, I think it outweighs the cost really. Thick foliage, it's really difficult at times. Lapwing chicks, once they're running around, you know, the parents do try and push them into thick foliage at some times, and it is tough to find them in that. And then weather, if it's hot, you're going to struggle. Sometimes if it's rain or misty, it does kind of put a haze across the screen. You are still able to see the birds, but it's just a bit more hazy than normal. Although we do find it works quite well in thick fog. I don't know why, but we're able to catch a lot of birds in thick fog. And with the XQ38F, IDing species is not particularly easy. With experience with the thermal, yes, you can pick up what species they are, but a lot of people are using the XPs if they want to ID species. So there's a guy called Wesley up north, and what he does is he uses a thermal in line with the night vision. So he used to use night vision to do wader counts and duck counts, but he struggled to find the birds, so he was spending hours and hours and hours trying to find them. But with the thermal now, he uses the thermal to find the birds and then the night vision to ID them correctly, and he's finding that really good, and he's actually on Twitter, and some of his stuff that he's putting out is really good as well at the moment. So although you can't ID species, he can assist you. If you've got experience, you can ID some stuff as well. So that brings us to the end for questions. Now I'll stop sharing this somehow, and then I'll hand back over to Nicola, and hopefully we can try and get some questions.
There should be a button at the top which says stop share if you want to. Thank you. Got it. Lovely. Okay, so because there's quite a lot of us on the call, as Peter's just done, you can add questions into the chat if you prefer, or if you look at the bottom of your toolbar again, there's a button which says reactions, and you can have a thumbs up or you can have a clap, and if you toggle that on and off, then that shows up on your screen. So if you wanted to then unmute yourself and ask a question, I can see that and I can call on you. So so there's a couple of things in the chat at the moment. So if we start with those, and then we'll see if anybody else has a question. So there's one from Peter here. Could thermal imaging, at least partly but effectively, assist with nest searching in grassland, grasshopper warbler, or reed beds, Savvy's warbler and creeks?
Yeah, I think this is a really difficult one, because with the thick foliage issue and the way the reeds move as well, a lot of the times we have tried to find reed warbler nests with it, There are people that use the thermal drone, I believe. I think Martin might be able to add to that. They use the drones to find certain stuff in heavier foliage. But we found it really difficult to find reed warbler nests. With grasshopper warbler, I think it would depend. I think you'd see a heat signature, but you'd have to get your eye in. So what we say when you get your thermal imager is, yeah, okay, it's not like you can just get your thermal and know it works straight away. You do have to get your eye into what you're looking at. So if you're looking for grasshopper warbler, if you find one and then use your thermal to understand what you're looking at and what signature's coming out from the heat, then yes, you can, probably. But I think in a reed bed, I think it'd be really difficult.
It's also interesting as well that Phragmites tends to hold heat. So you'll get sort of a false warmth in it because it's hollow. So it does make it difficult. We have found reed warbler nests, but they tend to be at the very, very extremities where you're close to paths or you're close in, but it's not going to give you a lot of distance into the reed bed. And I should imagine that's exactly the same for grasshopper warblers, where their nests are probably fairly well hidden. So it's a case of trial and error, but I don't think it's going to change a massive amount from not using one, if I'm honest. I think that might be a real strong limitation for them, such a small bird in difficult foliage.
Lovely, thank you. Peter, you put 2 questions on there, but because we've got some more coming through, I'm going to go on to the others and then come back to your second one if we've got time. So next one from Jean Roberts, should be good for finding curlew? Yeah.
I think Paul, in fact, I'll hand over to Paul for this because you did, didn't you, Paul? You found some curlew with it.
Yeah, I was out with Staff's Wildlife Trust up in the Roaches with one of their monitoring officers, and we'd noticed a pair of curlew, and they were quite a difficult bird to nest find, and we'd located the nest very, very quickly. We got a good indication from the parents where it was, but very, very quickly we'd identified the nest with the thermal camera from quite a considerable distance away. So it did work. Again, dependent on the habitat, if you've got a lot of tussocky grass or foliage, it can be limited, but on this occasion we went straight to it. We went straight to the 4 eggs within the nest.
Thank you very much. Next one from Roger Emmons. Do you use sound when lamping?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. We used to use, when we first started, we took experience from other people's Dazzling before thermal, and a lot of people use Skylark. So we started off with Skylark playing. But what we found is we kept having owls come at us most of the night because they seemed to like that noise. And then I think Paul found the flowing river sound, or someone passed that on to us. So actually we do have the flowing river sound now, which I think lasts about an hour as we're out. But if anyone wants access to that sound, if they drop us an email through our website, we'll happily share that sound with people. But yes, we use flowing river.
Brilliant. Would you be able to put your website address just in the chat so people can see that there, if you could do that, Paul?
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And then from Tony, has the technology drastically increased your estimates of populations for some species?
It's really interesting, actually, because I think Skylark, I mean, we keep going on about Skylark, but that is something, I mean, Paul started off with it very early on with targeting Skylark, and it's something we've got a real interest in the group now. And I do believe from using the thermal, you do get more accurate data. And actually, I think we're quite surprised how many more Skylark there are about than people probably think.
I think as well as that, Ben, we've also noticed other birds that were probably not really well known in areas. So in parts of Staffordshire, we were speaking to one of our farmers who's told me that they used to have golden plover on the farm going back to the 70s, but they hadn't been seen. But actually, when we'd been out at night time, we were finding flocks of them. So we had a couple of farms where they were probably unheard of and farmers weren't aware they were there. But after, as the darkness fell, we were finding quite substantial flocks. One on a farm just outside Coven, there were probably 200 birds there. They were just unheard of. So it's great for estimating it. A lot of the farms that we were working with had no idea of the numbers of grey partridge, English partridge they had. So it has been really, really, really eye-opening. So you know, some of the farms will go on, they might have 8 to 10 breeding pairs of skylarks, but come October, November, we're finding wintering flocks of 300 to 400. So it's just finding and showing things that people just aren't aware of, that you can't monitor through your standard sort of breeding bird survey or web surveys, that you just don't see them. So again, waders on scrapes and waders down into the Trent Valley of just by Stone. We can watch from quite a considerable distance, and you can note the numbers of snipe and lapwing there over night time. It is quite significantly, it does improve that kind of work.
Brilliant, thank you. Next question from Aurora. Once you've looked at the field with the thermal, what distance do you start blinding the bird with the torch?
Blinding's probably the wrong word.
Dazzling, we like.
Just for the people who aren't, you know, might not understand, and I appreciate Aurora's probably first language isn't English, so the dazzling technique just, it impacts on a chemical in their eye. It's very much as you walk in from the dark into a light, and it's a temporary response. So as soon as that's gone, you know, the bird's safe and well handled. So it probably just depends, Aurora. Woodcock maybe 40 meters, maybe a bit less. Skylarks 20 meters, but it's hit and miss really. So it's not. It's about trial and error really, not particularly too far away. But again, like we say, once the birds are handled, they're kept in the dark for a short space of time, and then they're released back into the field in situ. And we've done quite a lot of studies in relation to releasing birds at night, just to ensure that they go back safely. And we've never, you know, because we've got the thermal, we can watch them straight back out, and within a very short space of time, they're back into the field to roost. So we considered roosting the birds overnight, and we don't think it's appropriate in this case, because if you handle them quickly, release them into the dark, they go away quite, very, very well, really.
Thanks for explaining that as well, because I'm not a birder, so I didn't know the terminology there either. So thank you for explaining that as well. Then from Paul, did the camera work with woodcrete boxes as well as wooden ones?
What did sorry, can you repeat that? I missed that.
Did the camera work with woodcrete boxes as well as wooden ones?
I've only had wooden ones, if I'm honest with you. The bonus, I think, with the thermal and the heat is that the heat, especially on tip boxes and smaller boxes, the heat comes out of the hole. So if there is a hole in that box, the heat will emanate from there. Although we do with some owl boxes, you do see the heat. So if the bird's been leaning up against the wood, I think I went to one last year and I could see there was an owl in there by the shape. It was leaning against the box, and you could see there was hotter underneath, which were 2 eggs. So you could see that the heat of the eggs and the bird, and you could kind of make out what type of bird it was. But in my experience, only wood. But if there's a hole in there, the heat will come through that hole.
Great, thanks very much. Next one, from Christian, do you think that this technique could be used with waders?
Yeah, every day of the week. I mean, it is being used for waders from people that have come down to us or have invited us up to them, because in the Midlands we don't get the birds that some others do, so they invite us up there, and we've been up there with our thermals, and we've been able to find waders in the field. But also, I'm not sure whether they're on about monitoring waders but we're able to see wader nets. So if you've got nets set for waders, you can see the birds going into there. Or we went to Liverpool, didn't we, Paul?
Yeah.
And you could see thousands of curlew kind of along the shoreline. So you could see what type of bird they were. I'm assuming that's what they mean, but yeah, you can, yeah.
Well, what else is really interesting with waders is what else we're finding. So most of our work is done across cereal crops or winter stubbles, and I think a couple of our farmers are online, and what we're starting to see is that when we're out into the fields, we're noticing species like jack snipe and common European snipe out feeding within crop fields for night time. Now the jack snipe might be in a tractor rut or a little wet puddle, but though we're starting to see the advantages of cereal crops for some of those wader species. So it's quite often we'll see lapwing, snipe, common snipe, woodcock, golden plover, all in arable fields. So it's really interesting. It's really eye-opening. And I think earlier on in the video, I don't know if the person who asked the question missed it, but we have caught jack snipe in the daytime using the thermal technology just with a hand net.
Lovely, thank you. Next one from Moira. What advantage does an XP38 have over an XQ38F?
It's the optics. We like the Q because for Dazzling and other stuff that we do, we like the minimum zoom. So on the XQ38F, the minimum zoom's 3.1, and on the Ps they tend to be 4.1 plus. And what we find is that 3.1 gives us a nice idea of where that bird is from where we're standing. Whereas if it's 4.1, it's just a bit further out. So again, it's just about getting your eye in. But I think Matt Pryor has had a P, hasn't he? And it's purely on the optics that are a better quality optics to make out what actual species the bird is. So with a better optic, you can probably make out more what that type of bird is.
So as well with the XP range, they're significantly more expensive. So probably £800 more expensive, but they've got interchangeable lenses. So as well as having a fixed 38mm lens, you can interchange the lenses to have a 50mm lens. The difficulty is those lenses are into the hundreds of pounds to change them. So for us, for sort of value for money for doing what we do, yeah, the XQ38 is good. The XP38 is considerably better optics, but we don't really need it. I don't think many people would need that quality optics depending on, you know, what you're trying to achieve.
Brilliant, thank you. The questions are still coming in, but we've still only got a couple of minutes left now. So I think what we said is any questions that we don't get to, Paul and Ben, you'll take them and answer them, and I can email them round to everybody just so that you get the answers to those as well. So if we don't get round to your question, then keep sending them over, and we'll hopefully get an answer to you after the call is finished. But let's maybe have one more then. Are you finding a difference in bird numbers and species range subject to farming system with the advent of cover crops, etc.?
Thought we are, aren't we? It's just it's quite interesting because originally we were on most of our farming was zero minimum till, and we were kind of wondering whether that was kind of part of it. But actually, this year we've done some full inversion farms so ploughing, and farmers have invited us on those, and we're seeing good numbers of birds there. But I think what Paul's I'll hand over to Paul because we are finding that there is a specific thing that's really important for skylarks. I'll hand over to you, Paul.
Yeah. So for larks, I mean, we're big advocates of zero till. We think it's fantastic. We think it's got a far better environmental and ecological benefits than potentially full inversion farming. So there is a huge benefit to it. So what we tend to find is winter cereal crops are really important, but what we find for roosting larks is sort of overwintered stubbles are really, really vitally important. So most of our farms where we've got overwintered stubbles, that's where our larks are. One of the downsides to zero till is the use of cover crops. It's fantastic for soil, but at some point as the crops get to sort of 3 or 4 inches, the birds don't tend to roost in there. Now, it might be down to the risk of predation. It might be down to the fact that they suffer from condensation or damp in there. But we do find, and I think other ringing groups across the country have started to find, there is a sort of an optimal height for skylarks, and then anything over that higher, if they're planting sort of mustard crops or a cover crop into the winter, the birds will tend to move. They don't tend to move particularly far, but they just don't like in there. But again, like Ben says, huge advocates of zero till. We catch a majority of our birds across farms who do zero till or strip till. But again, this year we're starting to find that farms who might be full inversion that are leaving overwintered stubbles are still benefiting from large numbers of skylarks and waded species. I would say that zero till for waders, because of the amount of invertebrates and worms, it's significantly different, and you do find probably more wading birds across zero till farms.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. I'm afraid we don't have any more time for any more questions, even though we've got some more in the chat there. I will just answer questions at the end though. So this has been recorded, and the idea is that it will go up on both the Transforming the Trent Valley YouTube page and the West Midlands Ringing Group page. So we'll probably tweet and post about it when they're up and ready, which might take a few days, but you'll be able to see the recording again there. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Ben, Paul and Martin for this evening's talk. I am not a birder, but I found it absolutely fascinating. It was really, really interesting to hear what it is you do. And thank you so much for coming on and talking and doing all of that. And thank you everybody for being here as well, for giving up some of your evening to come and listen and chat to us. I really hope that you might come again to one of our other Trent Talks. We've got a huge range of topics on, so do have a look at our website if you wanted to join any more. But yeah, just once again, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you again for another talk soon.
Nicola, can I stay on and answer the questions? Is that all right?
If you want to, yeah, that's fine. I can keep the chat open for a bit longer. Yeah,
I've got no problem. I'll just go and answer the questions if that's all right.
That's fine. Yeah, I'll keep the call open. So it is 8 o'clock. If you do want to leave, then thank you very, very much for joining, and have a lovely evening. But as Paul wants to stay on, I'll keep the call open, and you can stay on a little bit longer if you like.
Do you want to go? Do you want to say the questions, Paul? And
don't know how to
answer them on here. Yeah, I'll do it.
I'll make a note of everything as well, and we'll get it sent
brilliant.
out. One last thing as well, I will be sending out a quick a feedback form via Google Documents. So I'll do that tomorrow morning to everybody who's joined the call. It's not compulsory for you to send it back, but it just would be really helpful for us to just to get your feedback on the call, on the organisation of it, on and any tech issues and anything that you'd like to see us improve for next time. So I'll send that out tomorrow morning. But again, thank you very much, Ben, Paul and Martin, and thank you everybody for coming.
No worries, thank you. I'm struggling to figure out how to view everyone's messages. How do you view everyone's messages, Nicola?
Have you found the chat?
I found the chat. How do I scroll up? Oh yeah, there's a little button there. You should just be able to
scroll, yeah.
To be honest, there's some people on here that probably can answer some of the questions better than us.
Yeah.
I've just seen Wendy James on there. Right. I'm just going up. Where did we get to?
The last one.
Oh, that was it. Richard Barnes, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've got just one that Tony had asked about drastically increased estimates. We've done that, haven't we? There's far more birds than you'll imagine.
So Josie has asked, does the time of day, temperature-wise, affect success of? Yeah, it does. I mean, when we went out with the lapwings, we were really specific around how long, what time we went out, what the weather was, because we were worried about chilling and stuff like that, the youngsters. So we made sure that it wasn't too late in the day, but not early, so it was freezing cold. But yeah, it will do.
I mean, to be fair, we found nightjars with it sort of up till 10 o'clock in the morning, but, you know, really warm day, depends on the habitat. If you've got a lot of pebbles or stones or grasses, a hollow tube, as soon as it starts to warm up, you do lose some of the ability to differentiate between what is a nest and an egg and, you know, what is habitat.
Tony Bennett has asked, how long a recording do you get with the imager? Well,
depends on the memory card.
Yeah, you can record forever, but the problem is you do have an app. So you can either put it straight onto your computer, or you can put it on an app and then you convert it and share it via the app. So it is quite big memory, so you just have to be mindful of how much memory you use. But we've done recordings of 5 minutes plus, haven't we? Or you can do 10 seconds. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve and what you want to put on there.
Tony, if you search on YouTube for West Midlands Ringing Group, there's quite a few of our videos up there. It'll give you an idea of how long it'll go for.
So Patrick Hancock has asked what volume we play the flowing river at. But I think it's difficult with our sites because our sites, we struggle with light pollution because of how close to towns and cities we are. And some of the sites are quite noisy with sewage works nearby. So I think it's just kind of weighing up. We don't have it blaring. We have it just to cover up our foot traffic on the stubble. Because if the bird does hear, it's gone pretty much. So we just try and play it at a sensible level where it's covering your foot follow through the field, or whether you're whispering to each other to kind of understand what you're trying to achieve during that.
I mean, if you live by the coast, you could have the sound of waves lapping on the beach or whatever. It's purely just to hide that last few steps.
So this one's an interesting one, Hoppy. Christian Barner has said, do you think this technique could be used for monitoring an intensity of migration? Well, we've sat and done overnight overhead watches, haven't we?
Yeah.
But we can't ID species from it.
I think tied up with your VisMig and your nocturnal microphones. I know Clive Davis, who does a lot of not MIG and the nocturnal sound recordings on there. I think it does work. When you hear red wings going over and you think I can hear one call, you look up and there's one bird. Well, actually, when you look up, there's far more. So I think that in combination with your parabolic mics or your audio recording would be really useful. I mean, I know when the Scota were moving earlier on this year, I sat in the garden in Penkridge and I saw 3 go over combined with the calls. So it will work. It just depends on how much you think you're going to get from it. If you're pretty good at monitoring how flight birds fly overnight, flight patterns with the thermal and video combined with some other kind of system like microphones, I think it would work definitely.
Wendy James has put a comment on there which is really helpful to say, like we do with Nightjar, she uses it for storm petrels to monitor nets from a distance, and it saves a lot of walking down cliffs. For a look, so reduces the need for torches and potentially disturbing nearby flying birds. And I think again that really does kind of go along with what we've been saying throughout the whole night. Reduces time in the field, reduces us having to do work, and reduces disturbance. So that's really good, Wendy. Thank you. Tony Bennett, if a farmer has skylark plots in the field, do you find them being used inhabited at night?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. We're seeing this at the moment on Overbury Estate in Tewkesbury, that they keep quite a few skylark plots in there. And even when they're planting cover crops, those skylark plots tends to be a bit smaller, and they do use them quite a lot. In fact, I know there's been some press about how effective they are, but I would say that they do tend to hold more birds than other areas, especially when there's a cover crop around it.
Kev Clements has asked, will you be publishing results of your skylark studies in scientific journals? Yes, we're currently getting stuff written up as we speak, Kev. We're taking more details from skylarks than ever before, and we're just in the process of putting a funding application together for some very interesting work. So I'm working with a local university, so we're hoping to publish that as soon as we can, really. Thanks for that question. A lot of people saying thank you, learned quite a bit. Just going through. No, I think we're pretty much there. I think we've done through all the questions, and we appreciate everyone that's come from all over the world, really. So it's been great. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for such excellent hosting, and it's nice to see Richard Tomlinson there, because without farmers like Richard, we wouldn't have any ground to go on. So really good to see you here tonight as well, Richard. Thank you for that. Thank you. Lovely. Have a good night, everyone. Lovely. Cheers. Thanks very much, everyone. Right, I'm going to close up. So thank you very much for joining in. Thanks a lot. Bye. 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 Thank you. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Bye.